Ostensible funding for Rights and Wrongs, the Human Rights Television series, has been provided by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Body Shop Foundation, and the Aaron Diamond Foundation. Globalvision presents a new program on the cutting edge of change. This week, the rights of Indigenous people to protect their lands, their lives, and their cultures from an encroaching world. Everywhere Native people are marching, speaking out, demanding to be heard. From the Philippines, a report on the gold rush that has left the land poisoned and the Taboli people struggling to preserve their way of life. And the story of Paradise Lost. Native Hawaiians have lost all but the smallest hold on the lands they once ruled.
It's all alive! It's all real life!
And their native culture faces extinction. In our cultural segment, a celebration of Indigenous people through their music and dance. All this on Rights and Wrongs, the television magazine of human rights. In New York, Charlene Hunter Galt.
History shows that the claims of Native peoples to ancestral lands holds little weight in the eyes of an expanding world. Europeans colonized and claimed much of the world as their own. In the United States, the expansion westward forced Native Americans off their lands and finally onto reservations. The rights of Indigenous peoples have been virtually ignored. Now, voices of protest from Indigenous peoples are growing louder. However late, Indigenous rights are becoming a priority, and respect for Native lands and Native culture is taking hold. The world, it seems, is beginning to listen. On the island of Oahu, not far from the booming beach mecca of Waikiki, the voices of Native Hawaiians can be heard. In 100 years, they have lost much of the paradise that was once wholly theirs, and they are waging a struggle to preserve the little hold on land, culture, and heritage that still remains. Our cover story presents excerpts from a documentary on the plight of Native Hawaiians produced by Edgy Lee and titled Papakolea, A Story of Hawaiian Land.
Oh, gracious Heavenly Father, you have been our fathers of our ancestors, and still today you are our Father. We call on you to be with us all. Especially we ask you for strength and courage and hope for our Native Hawaiians who are standing firm on this aina. Maiki ila apu.
This land belongs to our children!
No, without unless it's necessary, affecting the law.
This is Papakolea, one of 32 Hawaiian homesteads in the state of Hawaii. It is the only homestead located in urban Honolulu, a 2-minute drive from downtown's financial center and a brisk walk to Waikiki, but culturally it is miles away. Like all other Hawaiian homesteads, according to federal law, families can continue to live within the settlement borders only if each generation retains 50% or more Hawaiian blood.
I was displaced at age 9. My mother had to make a choice about leaving Papakolea. She had to make that choice because she felt like she was married to my Haole father, and therefore I would not have 50% Hawaiian to inherit. I'm saddened for my own children, my own mo'opunas, who by this definition that they're not 50% Hawaiian almost makes them not Hawaiian. And who has a right to make us not Hawaiian? When I watch my son climb the highest mountain in Ka'ala and hunt for food and dive in the Pacific, in the deepest ocean, and come up with he'e and squid and opihi, I realize my boy is Hawaiian. This is our place, and a Hawaiian should have a place. All Hawaiians should have a place in Hawaii.
I don't live in Papakolea, but you will never take Papakolea out of me. It was beyond me. It's too bad that my children can never experience. We come as often as we can, and I know for the families that are up there, the kids that I've grown up with, I'm sure they all feel the same way.
It has impacted on so many Hawaiians that because of that blood quantum definition, other people have decided if we are or if we are not Native Hawaiians. One of the great cultural skills that we Native Hawaiians have been known for throughout the world is our skill at being able to orally chant our ancient genealogies, which go back to some of them to 1100 years. Now, the Native Hawaiian family can usually go back 5 or 6 generations to prove their ancestry. The law of 1920 specifically negates that, supersedes our ancient genealogies, and says again, it is by our law, and we will decide, not by your ancestry, if you are or you are not Native Hawaiian.
When the provisional government overthrew the Hawaiian monarchy with the backing of invasion forces of the United States government, it confiscated control of ancestral Hawaiian lands. At annexation, the Republic of Hawaii ceded those stolen lands to the U.S. government, but neither the Queen nor the Hawaiian people ever surrendered sovereign claims over those lands.
The leading Hawaiian politicians felt that they needed to do something very drastic in order to rescue the Hawaiian people from extinction. The Hawaiian Homes Commission Act was drafted by a group of Hawaiian leaders. At the forefront was Prince Jonah Kuhio Kani'anaori.
Kuhio planned to rehabilitate the Hawaiian people by returning them to their ancestral lands to farm and to fish. He petitioned Congress to set aside the Crown lands, approximately 800,000 acres, for exclusive homesteading by the Hawaiian people. The American elite in Hawaii wanted to lease these same lands for ranching and sugar plantations. As the bill made its way through Congress, the planter and rancher lobbyists had great influence. They convinced Congress to set up some type of blood quantum to define who would be eligible. The Hawaiian leaders were forced to accept a compromise. A mere 200,000 acres of the worst of these lands were set aside for exclusive homesteading only for Hawaiians of 50% Hawaiian ancestry or more. They probably believed that after a generation, the Hawaiians would die off and the lands would revert back to their control. As plantations and ranches expanded, many Hawaiians were displaced from their rural homelands, forced to move to Honolulu to get jobs. Given the severe housing shortage, many Hawaiians settled on vacant public lands. Papakolea was ideal, suited to raising upland taro and sweet potato. Nearby Paoa Valley had natural streams and springs which furnished fresh water for domestic purposes. By 1930, official government policy was to evict Hawaiian families, who they called squatters, from government lands. 100 Native Hawaiian families lived on these ancestral lands now controlled by the U.S. government. Threatened with losing their homes, this community banded together to petition Congress to include their settlement under the Hawaiian Homelands program.
What makes Native people very much alike, be they Alaska Native or American Indian or Native Hawaiian, is that since the time of European contact, whether on the mainland or in 1778 in the Hawaiian Islands, became victims of history and of waves of migration, so that they lost control over their destiny and over their fate. When you have loss of self-esteem and a loss of a sense of self-worth, you begin to feel alienated and isolated even in your own homeland.
Where we used to live, the landlord, he passed on, and then the son took over the leasehold, and we were staying there for the last 10 years, and we got, like, ejected out of the house because he knocked down our house and built a prefab home. I work now. I'm out on sick leave because I injured my foot. Me picturing myself here, I feel sorry. Sometimes even when I cry, you see my kids in this kind of environment and stuff, man. The environment is nice, no trouble of any sort, but just of kids growing up without a roof over their head. We got a pitch tent. 5 days later, we got a break tent, sleep in the truck. Take cold showers. Eat over a gas stove. Which is, we getting by, because we got to deal with what we got.
Mr. Chairman, I come before you today as a representative of the Native Hawaiian people whose original position of self-governance, once under a sovereign, has been taken away. The Native Hawaiians are the last people of a once great nation, numbering approximately 400,000 at the time of the arrival of the first colonists to our shores. We are now depleted down to approximately 43,000. Threats of our extinction are severe. The loss of our identity, culture, and heritage is imminent. I represent these Native Hawaiians who are awaiting redress from the federal government for the loss of our lands, our economic deprivation, our declining social and physical health, and our disappearing culture. Meanwhile, we're counting fewer numbers, we're counting many deaths, we're counting the possibility of an extinct nation and an extinct people, while lawyers sit here and argue and debate on whether our race should live or die. I find that absolutely devastating to our people.
And what Papakolea symbolizes is that the Hawaiians have waited long enough. They've suffered in silence. They've made their own way despite that which they had coming to them as a result of the Hawaiian Homes Act.
A lot of people complain there is no aloha today. And I always tell them there is still aloha today, but it's now more expensive. It's in Waikiki Beach where the hotels are. That's not us. That's business. That's making flowers. That's making money. Cleaning toilets, making beds, cleaning the grounds. Now people are being taught, you ought to be grateful for this. Do your job. Waiting on tourists. So it's demeaning. When the missionaries came and when the Caucasian people came, they told Hawaiian people never to speak Hawaiian because you'll never get you anywhere. And this is the product. My dad can't speak Hawaiian. It's sad.
And how can you share with anybody else or keep the traditions alive unless you start doing it with your brothers and the people that you live with?
Which is sad.
If you could talk to kids your age coming up, what would you say?
Stick with your roots. Never forget your past.
I don't know if you have this anywhere else in the world. There may be other places like Papakolea, but to me, that will always be home.
You are watching Rights and Wrongs, Human Rights Television. Each week at this time, news and global perspectives you don't see elsewhere.
If you travel outside Manila in the Philippines, you quickly move back in time. Villages have few modern amenities, roads are dirt, and cultivated land soon disappear into jungle. It's here that native cultures have remained largely untouched by an outside world. All that changed for the Taboli people when gold was discovered. Joey Lozano, a Filipino, shot the camcorder footage for this report on the Taboli, a culture that is now no stranger to the exploitations of an outside world. In 1971, the world was stunned by the discovery of a Stone Age tribe, the Tasadai, on the island of Mindanao in the Philippines. The Tasadai were said to be cavemen, living exactly as they had for thousands of years. Under the guise of protecting the Tasadai culture, the Philippine government promptly sealed off the remote region and then carefully escorted anthropologists and Western media in and out of the Tasadai reservation. But the entire affair was a hoax. The Tasadai actually were a part of a group of people indigenous to the area, the Taboli. The Tasadai hoax was the root of the modern exploitation of the Taboli land and people, a process that now threatens to wipe out the Taboli culture and perhaps the Taboli people themselves.
Mindanao is really very rich, you know. We're sitting in a pot of gold.
The gold rush came to the land of the Taboli in 1989, when the Philippine government opened their protected reservation to small-scale mining. Since then, gold mining and processing operations have sprung up virtually unregulated.
Since the livelihood of the people in Taboli is insufficient enough to give them 3 daily square meals. That's why we go to start the mining activities within the Taboli Civil Reservation.
Don Tuan is the mayor of Kimato. A Taboli himself, he claims to represent the tribal interest. He also represents his own interests and those of his 3 brothers, all of whom hold important positions in the region and who benefit most from the mining industry in Taboli.
My Tuan was the former mayor here. Fludi Tuan was the president of the Tribal Mining Corporation. Yani Tuan was the president of the gold buyer, and all of a sudden I was the administrator of the Taboli Civil Reservation.
Environmentalists warn that the mining is hazardous. The Taboli are using mercury and cyanide to process the gold, apparently ignorant of the dangers involved.
Was there any group who had explained to the Taboli people what are the implications of this small-scale mining and the use of mercury especially? The indigenous peoples are not able to cope with this unless we explain to them in, very honest and sincere way.
Mercury vapors are released into the atmosphere by blowtorching. Mercury is seeping into the groundwater, affecting vegetation, grazing animals, the Taboli people themselves. The poison is also carried by rivers into the sea, contaminating fish and communities all along the way. Mercury poisoning is also known as Minamata disease. It was first diagnosed in 1956 in Minamata, Japan, where an epidemic erupted 24 years after a factory had begun pouring mercury into the local environment. The resulting disease attacks the nervous system, causing mental retardation, paralysis, and death. The effects are still being felt in Minamata. Ironically, the disease may soon be returning to Japan.
To think that we are selling actually fish, not only to other parts of the Philippines, but also to countries like Japan,
The Philippines Environmental Agency, the DENR, is officially charged with the regulation and monitoring of mercury processing.
The former National Pollution Control Commission, which is now under the DENR, they are conducting regular monitoring as far as the water audit along Kimato River. And so far, they are not allowed. Meaning maybe it is within permissible level.
The Philippine government officials have not made environmental protection a priority. They have not signed UN treaties dealing with environmental impact and clean water, and they're not bound by the hazardous waste treaty which they signed but have not ratified.
Safety is not only the concern of the DNR, it is also the concern of everybody because we are the one who are in danger. We are doing our shares, but we must also do their shares for the protection of their own lives.
Mercury poisoning may not be visible in the population for years to come, but mining's effect on the Taboli environment is obvious now. Forests are logged for timber to support the mines, although many have already collapsed, and hundreds of Taboli have been killed. Moreover, this mountainous region is under constant threat of landslide.
Anything could happen any moment. Let's say, given a very high precipitation, it could really be catastrophic.
The Taboli culture is also in mortal danger. An economy centered around mining threatens to wipe out the traditional economy based on barter. Worse still, many children are dropping out of school to work in the mining industry. The gold rush has brought more than speculators to Taboli land. It has brought a new fatalistic philosophy.
Drink and be merry, for tomorrow you die. Anyway, you mine and use mercury, you're going to die. Don't mine and don't use mercury, but you are still going to die anyway. So might as well, before they die, they will be able to provide a better life, no, to their family.
We, the Taboli people, can decide for our fate. If we think that we destroyed our homeland, then we can say it no. But if we think it will benefit us and benefit this town, then we have to talk it over.
I think we owe the Tabolis an explanation. An honest explanation, anong magiging implication nitong small-scale mining activities and the use of mercury. And then I think if they are able to understand bakit, I think they themselves will say no, considering the fact that for years they have maintained a very harmonious relationship with nature aimed at, sustainable, so-called sustainable development.
Rights and Wrongs welcomes your written comments and suggestions. You can also order a transcript for $5 or a video cassette for $24.95 by writing to the Global Center, P.O. Box 311, Radio City Station, New York, 10101. Send checks or money orders only. Credit card holders call 1-800-541-2535.
It is in song and dance that Indigenous people so often celebrate their culture. At last year's Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Indigenous groups were given center stage and their performances were recorded. We offer excerpts of those performances in the hopes of giving you a rare glimpse at the cultural heritage these groups are fighting to preserve. Thank you for watching. We hope you'll continue to join us for Rights and Wrongs every week. We began this broadcast with excerpts from the documentary Papakolea, A History of Hawaiian Lands, and we close with images from the Hawaiian Islands, the lands Native Hawaiians call home, even without the right to claim it. I'm Charlene Hunter-Gault.